Okay, geweldig. So we are in the middle of Chav Ches Amud Beis. Today's daf is Chav Tes. So we are going to begin at the Tanu Rabbanon of Chorgoi. So one of the people listed in the Mishnah that is not Neman or Eidos is a stepson. So if someone marries a woman and the woman has a son, he will not be able to say Eidos for you, you won't be able to say Eidos for him, but it's Levadoi. Unlike the rest of the cases in the Mishnah, where it includes B'neihen, the Chasneihen, this is Levadoi, only the Chayrik himself, but it does not include the children and the sons-in-law. Now, we have to do a count of how many people are mentioned in the Mishnah that do have that are possible for Eidos, and the B'neinu for Chasneihen are also possible. So let's just count it. Ochiv, his brother, V'achei Aviv, uncle, Achei Imai, uncle, Baal Achoisai, brother-in-law, Baal Achois Aviv, uncle, we're at 5. Baal Achois Imai, we're at 6. Baal Imai, we're at 7. The Chamav is 8. The Gisai is 9. And with Chorgoi, it will be 10. But Chorgoi is in a distinct category because he doesn't include B'nein v'chasnein, so it would be 9 plus 1. We have to keep that in mind because that count is going to become very relevant shortly. Zok to Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, Chorgoi levada, which means it's the Chayrig only who is only possible by himself. But for instance, Gisai is a brother-in-law. That would be similar to the rest of the cases in the Mishnah, that it would also be B'nai Sein v'Chasnein. But to be Yosy Omer Gisai, as Rashi teaches, Gisai means it also includes Gisai Levadai. So Gisai and Chorgoi will be the same. V'Tanya Idich, we had another brisa that says Gisai Levadai, which would be a repeat of Rabbi Yosy, who says Gisai Levadai, meaning the brother-in-law, he is not one to say Eidos for you, but his children and his Edemis, they don't count. They could say Eidos. Rabbi Yehuda Chorgoi. Rabbi Yehuda said Chorgoi, which means it's the Chayrik, meaning it's the stepson, he himself is not named to the Eidos for you, but his children and his Chasnein would be. So Micah Amar, let's try to get clarity in what the Machloikis is between Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Yehuda. Ilema Hachika Amar, Chorgoi Levadai, V'hu Adin Lagisai. If Rabbi Yehuda says that Chayrik has the same status of Gisai, meaning in both cases it's only the person himself that's possible Eidos, but not the children, not the sons-in-law. Well, then Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosy are in fact not arguing. They're actually saying exactly the same thing. But if they're saying exactly the same thing, and they both agree that the Chayrig as well as the brother-in-law, only their apostle, but not their children, how will that make sense in our Mishnah? Because our Mishnah clearly makes a distinction between Gisai and Chorgoi. Elamasnis in our Mishnah, the Katani Gisai is who Ubenoi V'chaisnoi. It's only the Chayrig that's only Levadoi money. Loi Rabbi Yehuda v'loi Rabbi Yosy. Because both of them hold that the Gisai as well is Levadoi. So that cannot be shot in Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosy because we don't have any Tana who will be responsible for our Mishnah. This is what the machlokes between Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Yehuda must be. Chorgoi levadoi avol gisai hu ubenoi v'choisnoi. Rabbi Yehuda holds that the chorg is unique, that himself is possible Eidos, but the children are kosher Eidos. Avol gisai, but the brother-in-law, he is not only is he himself not neman, but hu ubenoi v'chosnoi, his sons and his sons-in-law. Which would be perfectly consistent with what our Mishnah says, and then we can say that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. But also Rabbi Yosy will come to argue on our Mishnah, and he'll say, Gisai levadoi, aval chargai hu ubenoi v'chaisnai. And Rabbi Yosy takes the exact opposite approach. That what you, Rabbi Yehuda, says by chayreg, that's the halacha of Gisai, of a brother-in-law. But by a chayreg, I hold, it's like your Gisai, meaning hu ubenoi v'chaisnai. So, and we would say that the Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Frank Gemara, that'll work very well to explain our Mishnah. But we have a Reb Chia, and Reb Chia will have this problem. Ve'lahadatani Reb Chia shmoina avos, same esrim v'arba. Reb Chia said there's 8 people who are posel. Oh, thank you so much. There are 8 people that are posel edus, and if you count their sons and you count their sons-in-law, it's 3 times 8, which is 24. The problem was we did a count. If you include Gisai and Chargoi, it's 10. If you include one or the other, it's going to be 9. So, Mimanavshach, Sai according to Rabbi Yosy, and Sai according to Rabbi Yehuda, there's 9 included. Because according to Rabbi Yosy, you have Chargoi that includes Hu v'noi v'chaisnoi. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have Gisai, which includes Hu v'noi v'chaisnoi. So 9 are the avos. So it should be 9 times 3, which is 27, not 8 times 3, which is 24. And therefore, command, loiche Rabbi Yosy, or loiche Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Chia's comments will not be consistent with Rabbi Yosy nor Rabbi Yehuda. Ela hachi ka'amar. This is what the machloikis between Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Yehuda must be. Chargoi levadoi aval gisai hu v'noi v'chaistai. Pshat in Rabbi Yehuda does not change. And just like we said before, he's consistent with our Mishnah that the Chargoi is the only relation, that it's only him that's posel edus, but his children are not. But Gisai, the brother-in-law, just like the Mishnah says, not only is he not Neman, but so too his son and his son-in-law is not Neman either, which is perfectly consistent with our Mishnah, just not consistent with the Bryce of Reb Chia. As Rabbi Yosy l'meimar, Gisai levadoi v'choshkein Chargoi. Both Gisai and Chargoi, it's only that person themselves that's not Neman, but their children are. According to that sheet of Rabbi Yosy, in fact, there are only 8 avos. And therefore, we must need in Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah, which counts 9 avos, follows the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. And the Braisa of Rabbi Chia, which says 8 avos, will be following the sheet of Rabbi Yosy. So, halacha l'maisa, not halacha l'maisa, but pshat l'maisa, is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, which follows our Mishnah, the only kurva listed in the Mishnah that applies only to the person itself and not to the children would be chayre. While according to Rabbi Yosy, that applies to 2 of the kurvas, Sai Gisai and Sai Chargoi. It's only the person themselves and not their children. Amar Rabbi Shmuel, halacha ke Rabbi Yosy. The halacha like Rabbi Yosy. Now, we're going to soon see that's going to be a little bit confusing because we actually have 2 Rabbi Yosys to deal with. We have Rabbi Yosy of our Brisa. Rabbi Yosy of our Brisa says that Gisai and Chargoi, both, it's only them and not their children, but Gisai is going to be also, right? Your brother-in-law will not be Neman to say Edus on you, nor will you be Neman to say Edus as a pair together with your brother-in-law. That's what the Brisa that we just quoted from Rabbi Yosy holds. But if you go back and look at a Shita that's quoted in the name of Rabbi Yosy in our very Mishnah, you'll see a different story. You'll see that Rabbi Yosy said, Zumish is Rabbi Kiva. Avol Mishnah Rishayna says, V'chol ha'yurei li'arshai. You know who you're not Neman for? Someone who you will yarshin. If 2 people marry sisters, they don't yarshin each other, right? 2 brothers-in-law, because they married to sisters, they don't yarshin each other. So according to this Rabbi Yosy Mishnah, in fact, a brother-in-law will be Neman for his brother-in-law. So we actually have a machlokes between our Mishnah and the Brisa, what Rabbi Yosy holds. Does Rabbi Yosy say that one brother-in-law is Neman for his brother-in-law, like it says in this Mishnah? Or is it like we quoted just now in our Brisa, where Rabbi Yehuda holds a brother-in-law is not Neman for his brother-in-law? which leads us to a story. Ahimatanta davachasimi aleh trei gisi. There was a matana. How was the matana given? Through a star, through a star, a king star. But the Edom on the star were two brothers-in-law. So Sover Rabbi Yosef Lachshura. Rabbi Yosef said, this is a kosher star. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel said, Halachic Rabbi Yossi. And we'll assume that means the Rabbi Yossi of our Mishnah that holds the two brothers-in-law could say Edus together. Amar Le Abaye. Abaye says, don't be so sure. Mimai Rabbi Yossi Damasnisin the Machshur Begisai. Who said when Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel passing like Rabbi Yossi? He meant Rabbi Yossi of our Mishnah, which allows two brothers-in-law to testify for each other or together. Dilma Rabbi Yossi the Brisa the Apostle Begisai. Maybe what Shmuel meant was Rabbi Yossi the Brisa who's passing like, who holds that two brother-in-laws cannot testify together. It's not logical to say that Shmuel holds in Rabbi Yossi that it's possible with a brother-in-law. Why? The Amar Shmuel once said, should I give you an example of two brothers-in-law that are possible to say edus for each other? I know Pinchas. Me and my brother Pinchas, we're brothers-in-law. You're having Achi Vegisi. So these are two brothers, Shmuel and Pinchas, that happen to have married two sisters. So we're brothers-in-law and we're brothers. We're not Nemon to say edus on each other, which is mashma that what was Shmuel trying to say? The only reason why we can't say edus for each other is because we're brothers. The fact that we're brothers-in-law wouldn't make a difference. And that's why only us who are brothers are good examples of brothers-in-law that are not Nemon, because we're brothers. But if you're stam brothers-in-law and you happen not to be brothers, Shaper Domi, we would be Nemon on each other. So therefore, it makes sense to say, because of what Shmuel's comments were, with Ano Pinchas, it must be that he holds that brothers-in-law are Nemon to say edus for each other, which now makes that star matana a good star. Correct, Gemara, who said? Vidilma, what Shmuel meant with that was, Ano Pinchas, Mishum Degisai Kamar. Maybe he was just focusing on the fact that they're brothers-in-law. Me and Pinchas, who both married sisters, we would not be Nemon for each other. Because we're brothers, because we're brothers-in-law, not because we're brothers. And that will switch the whole psak of Shmuel to say that brothers-in-law are not Nemon, which means that Shtar Matan is not good. Amar Lei, so because of the fact that there's a good chance to say that maybe Shmuel meant that brothers-in-law are not Nemon together. So what happened was is Rabbi Yosef, who wanted to make this Shtar Matana into a good Shtar Matana, is now being challenged. So he says, you know what? He told the Makabel, you want to be able to keep it? Let me tell you what to do. Zil Kanya be'edim Mesira Karab Elazar. It seems like we can't rely on the Eid Chasima because they're brothers-in-law. We don't know if Shmuel allows that. But we know Rabbi Elazar told Edim Mesira Karsi. If you can find the Edim that witnessed when the Noiset Matana gave you the star, so then we'll say that the Edim Mesira, the Edim that witnessed the transaction, they're the ones who make the kinyan. Fact Gemara, how could you say that via Amar Abba Moed Rabbi Elazar ben Mezuyif mitoichle? Show apostle. When does Rabbi Elazar say Edim Mesira Karsi? That's if they're the only Edim there. But if there's posula Edim that are signed on the star, like two brothers-in-law, even Edim Mesira wouldn't work. So Rabbi Yosef says, you know what? Zil, I guess you're going to have to go, and I have no way to make you be Zaych in this matana. The Rabbanim that I'm sitting on the Bezna with have convinced me that this matana might not be a good matana, because the two Edim are brothers-in-law. Edim Mesira won't work, and therefore, unfortunately, I have no way to validate his gift. Rabbi Yehuda said back in our Mishnah, that afilu meisa bitoi yesh lebanim mimena harei zakorev. When there's children there, it maintains that relationship. Amar Rav Tancham, Amar Rav Tavla, Amar Rav Bruna, Amar Rav. Halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Amar Rav Nachman ain't halacha Rabbi Yehuda. If the wife dies, it doesn't matter if there's children; they're no longer considered related. V'chein Amar Rabba Bar Barchana Amar Rabbi Yochanan ain't halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Ika demasni law the Rabba Bar Barchana aha. There are those who say that Rabbi Bar Chana never commented on whether or not Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda. He commented on a completely different case as follows. Ezudar Rabbi Yosy Aglili. Rabbi Yosy Aglili made the following drasha. Uvasa el kohanim halavim vela shoifet asher yeh b'yavamei. Torah says you'll come to the judges that are in that period of time. Frag the Gemara, which judges are you supposed to go to? Someone who died 100 years ago. That's surely not going to happen. So of course you're going to go to a contemporary Rav. So what is the pasuk telling you about that? It has to be a shofet asher yeh b'yavamei. Ella, this is referring to a shofet shahaya karev v'nisrachik. If you had a shofet that was once related to you, and now he's not related to you, that would be a good shofet to go to because it's a karev v'nisrachik. It's a shofet asher b'yavamei. At that time, he's good. And therefore you're allowed to paskin on behalf of a person that was once your relative but is no longer your relative. The sons of the father-in-law of Mar Ukva, in other words, Mar Ukva's brother-in-law, Mar Ukva's wife's brothers. What happened? Now, it's interesting to note, we once had a story about Mar Ukva and his wife. They were awesome people. They used to go around giving people tzedakah, so in such a way they wouldn't know where they got it from. And the story what happened where they once gave money to somebody, and this person heard something, so he ran after them so he could see who's giving them. He could see who's giving him that money. So he ran after Mar Ukva and his wife, and Mar Ukva and his wife jumped into an oven, into a hot oven, because they didn't want to be discovered as the people who gave this tzedakah. And Mar Ukva's feet were burning on the floor of the oven. So he stood on his wife's feet because she was not susceptible to getting burnt by the oven. And the Gemara tells us, you know why his feet were getting burnt and his weren't, and hers weren't? Because when he gave tzedakah, he gave money that wasn't ready to be used. He still had to go buy food with it. But when she gave tzedakah, she gave him money. She gave him food, ready-made food. So that put her level of chesed on a higher level than his. So by him standing on her feet, it protected his feet from getting burnt. That's right. So clearly, what's happened? Well, nowadays it's so easy to buy food. In those days, it was much more difficult to prepare, and also you had to prepare. There was a lot of work involved. You give someone wheat; it's a bigger budget to prepare it. But Akalponim, we're not talking about pushovers here. We're talking about some very serious people. So Mar Ukva's brothers-in-law. It says probably Mar Ukva's brothers were some very chashuv people because you see who his wife was. So, but they were kroivim v'nisrachak uhavu. Because after Mar Ukva's wife died, now Mar Ukva is no longer related to his brothers-in-law, and therefore also the kamei dina. They came to him with a din Torah. They wanted him to be the posek. Amalu, he said, "I'm sorry, my dear brothers-in-law, or my dear former brothers-in-law. Still not lechuladina. I'm apostle. I can't pass him for you. Amalei my daitach. Why would you say that we're apostle? Is it Rav Yehuda? Do you hold like Rav Yehuda, who holds that once there's children, you remain related? But that's not true. We don't pass like Rav Yehuda. Anan ma'isinon igritum ma'arava. We brought a letter from Eretz Yisrael. The ein alachik Rav Yehuda. We don't pass like Rav Yehuda. So you should be able to pass him for us. Amalu, he said, Atu bekava dekira idepkana bechu. What do you think that I consider myself stuck to you with a sticky wax? In other words, do you think I'm not paskening for you because of Rabbi Yehuda's halacha, because I consider myself related? Of course not. I agree that we're not considered related because my wife passed away, even though we have children. That's fine. The reason why I can't pasken for you is the loikamina paselna l'chudina elam shum dina. You won't take. You're my brother-in-law. You don't have enough respect for me, and you're not going to be afraid of me and accept whatever I pass him, because you think you're my buddy. You think you're my brother-in-law, and that's why I can't pass him. Nothing to do with Rabbi Yehuda's psak that we're considered still craving. No, it's the mitzias. I'm not going to pass him for people who will not have the enough respect for me to take it seriously, even though they might not like the psak. Zok Gemara weiter. Oyev zeh. What is an oyev? It's a shushbin. That's someone who you have close enough a relationship with that you wouldn't be able to say ages for him. The chama, how long does this period last where he's still not neman for you? Amar Baba Mabirmiya Amar Rav Kol Shivish Yemei Mishta. all of these 7 days of Sheva Brachas, the Shushbin is usher, or he's not neman to say Eidus for you. I don't know what our equivalent of a Shushbin is. I'm not sure if we have that equivalent, like a best man. A shomer, is it a shomer? I'm not sure. It's only the day of the chasana. His shushvin wouldn't be neman for him, and vice versa. But even on the second day of Sheva Brachos already, he would be neman. Hasoine, kol shaloi diber are 33 days. If you didn't speak like 30 days for 3 days because you're angry, that is a soine. Tanu Rabbanan. V'hu loy oyev loy ya'idenu. So we know the pasuk is speaking about a retzeach, and it says, "Oy b'chol even asher yamus ba v'loy ra'is v'yapel Allah v'yamis." That's a retzeach, and then it says, "V'hu loy oyev loy," and he didn't hate him. Who didn't hate him? Zok to Gemara, we're darshaning. Pashup shot is it's talking about the nirtzach. He didn't hate him, but that's not what the Gemara darshans. V'hu loy oyev loy is going on the dying. The dying is not his enemy. Then he could paskin for him. So if he doesn't hate him, ya'idenu, then you could be a dying for this murder case. And then the pasuk goes on and says, "V'loy mevakesh v'asoi." You weren't looking. I'm sorry, I didn't read it right. V'loy ya'idenu, he could be an aid. If he didn't hate him prior to that, you could be an aid. V'loy mevakesh v'asoi, which the pasuk continues to say, is yadinenu, you could be a dying. So the pasuk that's describing a Ritzeach is also telling us who could be an aid and who could be a dain. From the pasuk we see that a soine wouldn't be able to paskin, nor would he be able to say edus. Oyev minalam. How do we know if he was a good friend? He would also not be neman. Zok Gemara kribe hachi. This is how you should read the pasuk. V'hu loy oyev loy v'loy oyev loy. So we should read oyev to mean oyev as well. I'm not sure how this magic works, but we can read it both ways. Ya'idenu, then he could say edus for him. V'loy mevakesh for asoy and v'loy tevasoy yadinenu. If he doesn't have a bias either in favor of this accused or against the accused, he could be a dayan. Frank the Gemara, how does this magic work? Midu oyev ksiv. It says v'loy oyev lo. He doesn't hate him. It doesn't say oyev, so you can't automatically say it also means to disqualify an oyev. Elasvarahu, it's a logical svar. Oyev, if you hate somebody, my timer, why would you not be neman to say edus for him or to paskin for him? Mishum demercha kadaite, because you're removed from him, you don't like him. So by the same definition, you can say if hating somebody influences your perspective, oyev nami mekarvadaite. So you don't need a special limit for it. Logic tells you, once the Torah tells you that an emotion will distort your view of reality, and even though the Torah is talking about an emotion of hatred, we can apply that to the emotion of love as well. There Abanon, Hai loy oyev loy, v'loy mevakesh r'asoi, mar darshibe. Because if you remember, the Rabban in our Mishnah say that an oyev and a soine could say edus, right? The Mishnah says loy nechshedu. Klal Yisrael wouldn't make up an edus because you didn't like somebody. So Gemara, chad l'dayin. One is to tell you that you can't be a dayin if you love somebody or hate somebody, right? That the Chachamim agree. And idich, the other pasuk, because it says v'hu oyev loy v'lo mevakesh r'asoi. So what's the mevakesh r'asoi? Kidetanya Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda v'hu oyev loy v'lo mevakesh r'asoi. Two things. Mikan l'shnei talmidei chachamim. If two Talmidei Chacham don't get along, they're not allowed to sit on the same bezdin. So with that information, we could drop a whole list of Rabbonim that we know that wouldn't be able to sit on the same bezdin together. I was going to provide that list today to clarify Pshat in the Gemara, but I decided that I didn't marry off all my kids yet. Zok the Gemara weiter. Ketzad boit kines Edom. Once we finally figure it out who can be an aid, now how do we interrogate the Edom to make sure that their information is rock solid, reliable? Ketzad boit kines Edom. So first what we do is hoy machnisin oison lecheder. they would take them into a room, and they would scare them. Rashi says, how we scared them, but we would bring them into a room, we would scare them to make sure that they're afraid to say something that's not true. They take everybody out of the room. They send everybody out of the room. And then umishayrin is hagadol shabehen, and they let the older of the two Eidim, or the greater of the two Eidim, remain. So now it's just a Bezdin and one of the Eidim. They tell him, Emor, tell us, Heich ata yodea shezeh chayav lozeh. You're saying testimony that Reuben owes Shimon $100,000. How do you know that? Im Omar, if he said, you know how I know? Who Omarli? Because Reuben told me he owes Shimon $100,000. Who Omarli shani chayav loy? Or Ish Pliny Omarli shu chayav loy? Or some other fellow told me that Reuben owes Shimon $100,000. Loy Omar klum. That's not testimony. Ad sheyoymar, until the aide can say that I witnessed the following. B'fanenu hoida shu chayav l'misayim zuz. Reuben and Shimon were standing there, and I was there with another aide, and I heard Reuben tell Shimon in front of us, knowing that we were there, I owe Shimon $100,000. And the Gemara is going to say there's more involved. The Gemara is also going to say that Reuben has to say, I acknowledge that there's Eidim, and I want you to record what I'm saying. I owe Shimon $100,000. Then and only then is their testimony valid. But after they put the first aid through this interrogation, Machnisin is Hasheni, they bring in the second aid, Uvoit Kinoisoi in the same fashion, in Nimtzu Devrei Mechuvanim, if in fact their testimony is consistent, Noisin v'Noislin b'Davar, then they have the discussion. In other words, once the witnesses are presented, then Bezdin can deliberate. Shnayim Oimim Zakai. What if two Dayanim said Zakai, ve'echad Omer Chayiv? So the Allah is Zakai. Of course, you go bust to the right. What if Shnayim Oimim Chayiv, ve'echad Omer Zakai? Then it would be Chayiv. Echad Omer Chayiv, ve'echad Omer Zakai. What if it was a split? And the or afidu Shnayim Zakin, or Shnayim Mechayivin, or even if two out of the three Eidim were either Mezak or Mechayiv, and the third aid, the dying, and the third dying, and the third dying said Eni Yodea. So you might think if two said Zakai, the guy who said Eni Yodea, even if he said Chayiv, it wouldn't make a difference anyway. Nevertheless, you don't have a Bezdin. And since you don't have a Bezdin because he said he doesn't know, you have to add Dayonim. Yosifu ad Dayonim. And remember, we said you add them in pairs. As Rashi says, the Avagav, they have a Polagalai, you have a bottle b'miyuta, ki amar en yodeya, havakabi shalo yoshav bedin. It's as if he was never there, v'nimta din b'shnayim, and that means this Bezdin had only two people, anan talosa be'ina. You know, a dying saying, I don't have a psak, is like a president who says, I don't want to get involved in politics. Zakt Gemara Vater, Gomer Esadover, when they Bezdin finally came to a verdict, Hayamachnisin Oison, and they would bring back in the Baldin. Now the Gemara asks, nowhere in the Mishnah does it say they took the Baldin out. And Hagadol Shebedayonim, the greatest of the Dayonim, Oimer Ish Ploni Ata Zakai, Ish Ploni Ata Chai. That's how the verdict is delivered. Uminayin lechashayetzi. How do you know? Let's say you have two dayanim who said zakai and one said chai. How do you know that once the dying leaves, loyoymar, he shouldn't go to the guy who lost and said, "Ani mizaka." Really, I was advocating that you should be zakai, but what should I do? I was outnumbered. It's only because of my friends that overruled me that we had to paskin against you. But really, I'm with you. That's a disgusting thing to do. Hoylech Rochel uncovers secrets. Bezdin should not be revealing that. Unlike a Supreme Court verdict where all of the dissenting opinions are also clearly articulated, that's not what happens in a Jewish court. What exactly do we tell them at the point where we want to be ma'ayim alein, we want to scare them? How are you going to scare How are you going to scare these Edom? Zok to Gemara, Amar Bida, this is what they do. The pasuk says, Nesiim v'ruach, you can have clouds and winds, meaning all of the components are in place to have a geshmaka rainstorm to help us grow our produce. But the Geshemoyim, there will still not be rain, even though everything's in place and ready to go. Why? Ish mishalel b'mata sheker, because someone is enjoying falsehood. So basically, you're telling the Edom, we're going to starve to death. You're going to cause hunger if you are saying false witness. Amar Rava, they can say, I'm not afraid of that. Yachli Meimar, Shev Shni have a kafna. There could be a hunger for 7 years, and yes, it'll wipe out all the farmers, but Va'abava Umna Lechalef. But if you're a plumber or an electrician, and you're not relying on the produce of the field, you'll be fine. You'll do great. Did I forget to say heating, guys? You'll do great because you're not directly reliant for your parnasa on agriculture.
They'll have nothing to eat.
Well, things will be more expensive, but at least they'll still have income. The farmers won't have any income at all. Their business will go kaput. So, that might not scare the guy. Elama Rava, you know what we got to do? You got to threaten him with him that'll scare him. Amin lahu mapitz v'cherev. Let me look at the pasuk inside over here. Let me see what's it. Mevitz v'cherev v'cheitz shenoin. There's going to be destruction and megefos for who? Ish oine bereo etchaker. Someone who says false edus. Amar Bashi, that still might not scare him. Yachli lemeimar shev shni have a musna ve'inish b'loshani loshachet. There could be a magefa for 7 years, but if your time didn't come, your time didn't come. So I'm not worried because when my time is up, my time is up. Ella, Amar Bashi, Amali Nosan, Bar Marzutra, Amrinulu, you know what we tell them? Sahadi Shakri Al Grai Zili. You think that the people that are paying you to say false testimony, you think they admire you and they respect you because they're paying you. They also look at you like lowlifes. So you go after their ego. Even the people that you're working for, you think they respect you. They look at you as a lowlife, shabba lowlife. They wouldn't even ever think of being a shadach with you. You're a lowlife. How do we know that even the people sending you are lowlifes? Tichsiv, there's a story with, I believe Achav wanted the kerem of Nevois, and really he could have just taken it away as a king, but he wanted to make it look like he was entitled to it. So they decided that they're going to hire false witnesses to say that his person was Mevarach Hashem and cursed the king, and they're going to kill him in what would look like a real court, a case. Vaishivu Shnayim Anoshim, we're going to hire and pay 2 people to say Eidos, but these Anoshim that they hired, they themselves refer to them as B'nai Belial. So you see, they Negdoi against Navois v'Yodeu, and will have them say false testimony. Lemar berachta elikim v'melech. So you see, even when you're hiring a false witness, you're looking at your false witness as B'nai Belial. So what are you going to lie for? Even the people who are paying you to lie, they look at you as a low life. Those are the people that you're going to lie for. So that's what you tell them. You focus on this ego, and that'll make it back down. Im Omar hu Omarli ad sheyoymu b'fanenu haydaloi shu chayv le'misayim zuz misayayalei. This is a raya Rabbi Yehuda. Damar Rabbi Yehuda Marav tzorich sheyoymer atem edai. It's not enough for Reuben to admit in front of Edom that he owes Shimon $100,000. He has to say, you should be my edus. I'm designating you that you could be Edom that say that I owe the money. Only then will the edus be good. It my name Omar Abchi Bar Abba Omar Abyechanan Manali Biatcha Omar Lehain. What if I say Shimon goes to Reuben, you owe me $100,000, and Reuben says, yeah, I owe you the money. Lamachar Amalu. So the next day, Shimon tells Reuben, Tadeoli, yesterday you said you owe me $100,000, pay me. Amar Meshatani Bach. I never meant that I owed you the money. I was playing with you. Potter, he's Potter. Tanya Mihachi Manali Biatcha. Not only that, what would happen if I wanted to get on the record that Reuven owes me $100,000? So what did I do? I hid two Eidim where Reuven wouldn't see them, and then I asked Reuven, "Do you owe me money?" Reuven, you owe me $100,000. Hey, now there's Eidim that heard this, and more than that, I tell him, if they ploini, you ploini. What if I say, would you be willing to say this in front of Adam? If he would say yes, now I have Adam ready to go. And he says, no, I don't want to say it in front of Adam. I don't want to admit in front of Adam, because then you could take me to Torah and I'll be in trouble. So it was pretty clear that he's admitting that he owes the money, and he just doesn't want there to be Adam. And Adam heard this. So Lamachar Amalul Taneuli, Amaloi Mishat Anibach. He could still say Mishat Anibach. Therefore, he'll be Potter. And the Ein Toinin Lamesis. If there's a Mesis, someone who's Chayiv Misa, because he is trying to convince people to do Avodah Zarah, you never argue on his behalf. Frank the Gemara, what in the world is Mesis doing in the middle of a discussion of whether or not someone's a good aid for a loan? Mesis Mandach Hashemei. Who said anything about a Mesis? If the loiva didn't say Mishat Anibach, if he said Mishat Anibach, then his admission from yesterday is not admissible. But if he didn't say that, ain't Tayan in loy, Bezdin won't say, even though he admitted yesterday, it's not considered an admission. Bezdin won't say that unless he himself says, I never meant it. But Uvidin Nefashis, if it was a question of Din Nefashis, Alpha Gab Loy Tayan Tayan in loy. Even though he didn't say Mishat Anibach or whatever he could have said that would have exonerated him, we will actually give him kindness to help him exonerate himself. But there's one type of dinyan of fashis that we don't help. The ain tayan el mesis. A mesis we don't help. Frank Gemara, no mesis. Why taka don't we try to help him save his life? Omar B'chama Bar Chanina, mi pirkei Rab Chia Bar Abba Shmila. I heard from the teaching of Rab Chia Bar Abba. Shiny mesis. Rachman Omar loy sachmoil v'loy sechasa. The Torah says you're not supposed to have rachmanis on him. By a regular person who's on trial, we say that Bezdin has to try to help him, but we don't say that by a mesis because it says loy sachmoil v'loy sechasa. Omar Rab Shmuel, it says v'shavtu eda v'yitzilo eda. You have to help a regular accused, not a mesis. Omar Rab Shmuel bar Nachman Omar Bar Yonasan. Minayin she'ein tayan el mesis. How do we know this? Min nachash hakadmoini, from the nachash that caused Chava and Adam to eat from day to das. Damar b'samloi. Harba tainis hoyuloi lenachash litain. Lemaisi the nachash could have had tainis that would have exonerated him from the accusation. V'loi tam, and the nachash did not make those tainis. Since the nachash had tainis that he could have made arguments to save himself, how come the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't help him be melamed schus on himself? Because the Nachash himself didn't help. And the Nachash is considered a mesis, even though he didn't tell Chava not to believe in Hashem, but by telling Chava not to adhere to the only mitzvah that she had, that would be equivalent to a mesis. So my Havla the Meimer, what could the Nachash have said that would have exonerated himself? Talking more Poshet. Divrei Rav, v'divrei Talmud, divrei Mishaymin. I could have said, "What are you blaming me?" She knew Hashem said she shouldn't eat from the Eitz Hadas, so why would she be listening to me? Why would I be responsible for what she did? How do you know that whenever you add to something, you're only diminishing it? Shenemar, Amar Elokim, Hashem never said you shouldn't touch the Eitz Hadas. Hashem just said, "Don't eat from it." But she said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu also asked her to touch it. So what did the Nachash do? He pushed her against the Eitz Hadas, and nothing happened to her. So you see, you don't have to worry. And by being firmer than necessary, by creating more Isurim, by adding to what the Torah said, it actually hurt her quite a bit. It says by the dimensions of the Aron, Amasayim v'chetzi archai. Now, Amasayim v'chetzi archai, if it didn't have the aleph and it said Masayim v'chetzi archai, it could have been read as Mosayim 200. Mosayim could be read as 200. Putting the Aleph in front tells us it's just an Amma and a half. Rabashi Yomer, Ashtei Esrei Urias. Ashtei Esrei Urias, if it was to stay Shtei Esrei, it would mean 12. Ashtei Esrei means 11. So the ayin diminishes it. Amar Abaye, Lo Yishanu Elo the Amar Meshat Anibach. That the admission is not acceptable is only if the loy v'tanya I never meant it. I never meant it. I was fooling with you. Meshat Anibach. What if the time of the loiva the next day was differently? What if he denies that I never made that admission at all? But the problem is we have Adam that witnessed the admission, then Huchsa Kafran, this guy is a liar, because we know for sure he's lying neged Adam, because he said he never made the admission, and in fact there were Adam who could testify that. And therefore, he can't even swear to pater himself because we look at him like someone who is not trustworthy. Rav Papa Barei, Dirav Acha Barada, Hachi Amrinan Mishmei Rava. It's not true. He's not considered a Huchsa Kafran. You know why? Because called Mili Dechdi Loy Dechri Inchi. I never meant it. I said Meshat Hanibach. So if there's a possibility of Meshat Hanibach, that means you were hacking me a trimek. I said, yeah, whatever you want. I didn't really concentrate or focus on the conversation because it was a conversation that wasn't a serious conversation. So it's not a tanya that I didn't remember. It's a legitimate tanya to say Lahod Dvar Ma'ilam, because even though there were Eidim, but it's logical to assume that the loiva even forgot about his admission yesterday because it was not a serious admission. He was speaking to his friend in a bedroom, and the bedroom had a canopy bed that had curtains around all four sides of the bed. So he put the Eidim on the other side of the bed from where he was standing with the loiva, so that the loiva wouldn't chap that there's Eidim in the room. Amrlei, and Reuben told Shimon, "Money biyotcha, you owe me $100,000." Amrlei, Shimon said, "Hey, you're right. I do owe the money." Amar, iri v'shivchi lahaver lachsadi. Anybody who's up or sleeping should be an aid. In other words, he was trying to fool him into accepting Eidim, and he would assume that anybody in this room would be sleeping, and therefore he could safely say, yeah. And in the meantime, he would get kachap because the Eidim were awake. Amar lei, loy, he said, no, I don't accept that Iri v'shafri should be Eidim. Amar Rav Kahana, Amar lei loy. So of course, those Eidim are not valid because the loiva who made the admission specifically said, I don't want Eidim on it. Who the Achman Eidim v'kivra l'chavri. They were once in the basic forest. They had a discussion in the basic forest, and he hit some Eidim behind the grave. Amar lei. Same thing. Mani l'biyatcha, Amar lei hein. Are you willing for the living and the dead to be Eidim? So therefore, these Eidim wouldn't be valid. You know what you see from here? Rabbi Huda said that the admission isn't good unless the loiva specifically articulates, you are my Eidim. You see from here that it doesn't have to be the loiva who says that. Loishna ki amar loiva. Even if the Malva said Atamedai and the loiva didn't protest and say loy, that would be good Eidim. How do you know that? From these two stories. Time of the Amr loiva loy. In these two stories, the loiva said, no, I don't accept it. Aval ishasik. What if the loiva didn't protest and just the Malva said they should be my Eidim? Hachanami, it in fact would have been good Eidim. Zoktik more weiter. Hahudav akarilei kav rishu. They called him, you are a bundle of stories, meaning that you owe a lot of money. Amar, so he says, why do you say I owe so much money? Man masik bi ela pliny. Only Yankel and Beryl I owe the money. I don't owe anybody else money. Now, is that an admission that he owes Yankel and Beryl money? Also Tavuladina. So Yankel and Beryl came and took him to Bezdin. He himself admitted that he owes me money. Come to Rav Nachman in front of Rav Nachman. Amar Rav Nachman, Adam also shaloi laspiyas atzmai. People sometimes will say they have debt, even though they don't really have debt and they don't mean it. So why is he saying it? He's saying it because he doesn't want people to think he's too rich. This is a mouse sitting on dinarim. What does that mean? It means he's a rich guy who's cheap and he never spends his money. So it's like a mouse sitting on dinarim. He doesn't have any enough of it, but he has a lot of it. Hikashachav, when he died, before he died, he said, Planya uplanya masku bizuze. Chaim and Beryl, I owe them money. Was it the Shachav? After he died, also to Vanilla Yarshim. So Chaim and Beryl came to the Yarshim and said, your father admitted that he owes us money. Also, the command Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosy, Amalahu, Ki Armin Adam also Shalai Lasbeas Atzmai. When do you say someone doesn't want to make himself look wealthy? He tries to make people think he's not rich. That's if he's going to be living after that. There he might be believed. But if he knows he's dying and it's not relevant for him anymore, for his kids, maybe lie. So he had a shiloh over here, what to do. Maybe this is a good admission. So Parai Palga, he made him pay half, I guess because of his suffix. So what happened was, Tav'inu Ladina Leidich Palga. Now the Malva who was able to collect took them to Bezdin to collect the other half. So I guess the kids on their own paid half, and now the Malva is taking them to the Torah, he wants the other half. Amalu, you don't have a tiny. It's not considered an admission. He could have also said it, so you shouldn't think his kids are too wealthy. So if that's the case, maybe we should force the Malva to give back the half that they already paid. Amrulu, no, Kfar Harizakin. Since Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosy said that they should pay, we're not going to undo that. What if they were moida in front of two Adam and they made a kinyan about it? So the halacha is koisvin. Now, not only does the Adam have testimony, they also have a right to write up a star and make this into a milva b'shtar. V'lav, but if there's no kinyan done, ein koisvin. You wouldn't be able to write up a star. What about hoida b'fnei shloisha, which could be a bezdin already? V'loy kanam yada, they didn't make a kinyan. Rav Amar koisvin, because in front of bezdin, who has the power of hefker and hefker, they could write up a star for that. Rabbi Asi Amar ein koisvin, even if it was in front of three people. Hava uvda, there was a story, v'chosh l'rav l'hoder of Asi, meaning he said ein koisvin. He wouldn't let them write a star even though it was in front of three. Amar Bada Barava, ha'idisa. What about an idisa, which is a star that you write that I owe somebody money? It's an IOU note. Zimnin kasvinon. Sometimes we will record that with Adam and make it into a milva b'shtar. V'zimnin like kasvinon. And sometimes you don't. When do you? When don't you? Knivi biasvi. If I was moide in front of three people that were already sitting there, loy kasvina, because the fact that I was moide in front of these three people doesn't necessarily mean that I was trying to be moide in front of a bezdin. There happened to have been three people sitting there. But continue inu. But what if I gather three people to be moide in front of them? That shows that I did want to be moide in front of a bezdin, and there kasvina, you would write down this idisa would make it into a star. Rav Amar, afilu continue iu, even if the loiva gathered the three people to be moide in front of, still like a svinon, adu amar lahu havu alai dayani. He has to articulate, I want you to be dayanim. The fact that it looks like he wanted to assemble the best doesn't mean anything. He has to articulate it. Marbar Vashi Amar, afilu amar havu dayani, like a svinon, ad kvi duchta, visholchim zamnin lebenina. Unless there's the whole system happens. Bezdin sits down and sets themselves up in a specific place. And they send about Hasmona. And he comes, and then he's Moida, then and only then would Bezdin be able to write this into a star. What about Hoida the Metaltali the Kanamiyadi? I said, I owe you Metaltlin. The Metaltlin aren't right here. And we made a kinyan that I showed you that I owe you the money. So then, Koisvin, you would be able to write it into a star. Vimlav, and if there was no kinyan, ain't Koisvin. What about Makarki? I said, this property belongs to you. Okay? We didn't make a kinyan. But property is always like you're holding on to it because property can't move away. What would be the halacha? A meimer ein kaisvin. A meimer said you still wouldn't be able to write it down in a star. Or zutra amar kaisvin. The hilchos of kaisvin, when it comes to land, it'll be kaisvin because mammon is always considered be'en. Ravina ikla lida maharya. Ravina reached a city called Maharya. Amalei Rabdimi Barhuna mida Maharya le Ravina. Rabdimi Yehuda Rabbi Barhuna told Ravina, Metaltali the isnu beinayu mai. What if there's metaltalin here, and I'm moed that these metaltalin belong to you, but they're right here? Maybe it should be like karka. It'll be like karka, and therefore you would be able to write. You'd be able to write a star if I'm moed that it belongs to you. Rabbi Ashi Amar, keeping the machasher gebayin aloi. No, metaltalin. At the end of the day, it has to be picked up, it has to be taken. Therefore, even with a kinyan, you could not write a star on it. Hahu adisa. There was a adisa, meaning I was mighty from the bezin that I owed somebody something. They'll have a kosav ba. It didn't say in the star that was written the nusach, the proper nusach. What's the proper nusach? Omer lana. He told us not only that he's being mighty in front of us, but he also instructed us kisvu v'chitzmu v'havale. Write it up in a star, sign it, and give it to the malva. The question is, it didn't say that, so maybe it's not a valid adisa. Abaye v'Rav Damar Tevayu, Hani de Rish Lakish. This is similar to the case of Rish Lakish. Damar Rish Lakish, Chazaka in the Edim Choishman al Ashtar Elam Kinasis Gadol. The halacha is a cotton cannot do something like this. We say that if there's such a star in existence, the Edim must have known what they were doing, and they would have never have written such a star unless they verified that everything is legit and the person being moida was an adult. Who didn't over here? They know that unless the Baldin said kisvu v'chismu, they don't have a right to put it into a star. So for the fact that it was put into a star, we can assume that the loiva must have said kisvu v'chismu, otherwise it wouldn't have done it. Frank Gemara, you never heard of someone doing something that's wrong because he's misinformed. We're discussing it. We don't even know what the halakha is clear. The Safri de Bedina Yadi, and every sober is going to know not to write up such a star unless the loiva specifically said kismu v'chismu. Zok Gemara, they did a test. They actually tested the knowledge of the average sofer. Shelinu l'Safri de Abaye v'Yadi. It turns out the Sofrim are very well versed in the halacha of what they do, and they would never write a star unless they know that the loiva specifically commanded the Edim to write that star. Okay, we'll stop here. Yeah, we're running late. I'm supposed to be done today, right?